Don't dip your pen in the company inkwell. Don't hook up with people you work with. Definitely not somebody that works at the clubs you perform at, or really even comics nowadays. I know that's how people used to meet each other and connect. It's natural. The proximity of it, the familiarity of the day-to-day interactions, or all the time you spend with each other, having something in common, actually getting to know someone first instead of just randomly swiping on a stranger. But you throw alcohol into that, it's not a good mix. That method, in general, in our society, but especially in comedy, is fraught with landmines. There's been a lot of very well-known comics accused of some pretty bad things, and a lot of lesser-known comics or unknown comics accused of really bad things. Don't be one of them. Don't throw your dream away over a one-night stand. I'm not here to tell you if the new way is good, bad, or otherwise. That's irrelevant. I want to talk about reality and how to navigate it. Don't have flings with other comics. Or if you're gonna, know what you're potentially facing and what the consequences could be. Outside of something genuinely awful happening, which I don't even want to get into, and I'm praying that my audience is not that type of person. There's a lot of other things that could go wrong. You could wind up in that person's act. There could be a misunderstanding, and you ruin that relationship, and now you're avoiding certain mics or certain shows, and rumors are spread on both sides. If you're a male comic, you could be labeled a predator, even if you didn't do anything wrong. If you're a female comic, you could be labeled crazy, even if you didn't do anything wrong. I wouldn't hook up with a fellow comic now. It's not worth it. There was a time where I only liked female comics. I mean, we had so much in common. First of all, we're weird comics with this twisted sense of humor, and that's hard to find in the general population. So we automatically had something right off the start that bonded us. I lived with a comic. We almost got married. She's a wonderful, tremendous woman. She wound up getting married. She's living happily ever after out in Los Angeles. And it was a great relationship. I have no regrets. But think about this. Let's say a female comic and a male comic, they get together. And they're not just doing it to hook up. They're doing it because they genuinely love each other. You're going to face some other issues that you have to be aware of. If you're going to partner up with a comic, I think that's great. If you're both relatively sane and respect each other's privacy. But here's one thing you may not have thought of. What if one of you becomes super successful and the other one doesn't? What do you think that's going to do to your relationship? I've had that issue before. I didn't become insanely popular. I was dating another comic, and I started getting opportunities, and I could see that it was kind of like, it sucked for her. And she's in her head like, well, yeah, I love him. I think he's funny and talented, but why not me? I didn't really want to share a lot of the wins that I had in my career because I didn't want to make her feel bad. That's not healthy for either of us. For me not to want to share that. And what happens when a couple splits? Usually the friends are divvied up. This one set of friends goes with this one, the other set goes with this one. Imagine all those friends are comics. There's going to be nothing but chatter back and forth and all this stuff. And then what if another comic hooks up with your ex? What problems does that lead to? It's a nightmare, right? In my limited previous relationships with other comics, there was no social media. So when it was over, it was a big enough market. I was in LA that we didn't run into each other that often, and I didn't have to see all the things that she was doing. I couldn't imagine seeing her on flyers for shows on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. and looking at every male comic who's on there and trying to figure out, okay, this guy's a scumbag. He's going to hit on her. This guy has no loyalty to my friendship with him. It would have driven me crazy. It would have derailed my career for a certain amount of time. Don't hook up with the waiters or waitresses at clubs or at the open mic you go to, or the bartender or the manager or anything like that. First of all, this is their place of work. This is also your place of work. This is your office. This is where you go to do everything that you do in comedy. This is the stage. And why ruin that? Why taint it? The bartender could throw a fit and say, yeah, I don't want her in here anymore. Or a waitress could say, yeah, we hooked up and he's a decent enough guy, but all he does is run his mouth about how much this club sucks. I don't know too many good things that come out of breakups. Back in the 90s, they were starting to phase that out at clubs anyways. They were forbidding the wait staff from hooking up with the comics. And there's a certain allure. Hey, you're only in town for a few days or a week. You're in and you're out. You have these little romances or flings. And the club owners started to say, hey, enough of this. This is disrupting my staff, and we can't have it. They would have the wait staff and the bartenders sign pledges that they knew they could be fired if that happened. Because it's a business. This isn't the 80s. You can't go around doing blow and getting hammered all the time and banging everybody that you encounter. Yeah, it sounds like fun. But these are other human beings you're dealing with. There's a very famous story of a comic. I'm not going to say any names, but he was part of this comedy group. Like all these comics would tour together. Very famous. And he had to pay child support for, I think, 18 years for a baby that wasn't his. It was the headliners, the big stars kid. I mean, how do you deal with that? That would be so... I can't even imagine what that would be like to figure that out, that, oh, it's not my child, it's another comic's. There's one concept that's popped up in our culture in probably the last, 7 years, this idea of the power dynamic. I don't agree with that. I'm not going to go along with that. This idea that if you're up here as a comic... you shouldn't date or hook up with somebody it doesn't have the same level of power as you. Yes, of course, in a work situation, if somebody is beneath you and you're their boss and there's consequences if you want to break up with this person, whatever. But like an audience member, as long as you're like a decent human being, that whole idea blows my mind. It's basically... if you play it out, Brad Pitt can only date other super A-list actresses. Give me a break with some of that. There's a reason why people become rock stars. It's so that they can attract women that are out of their league or do anything in their life. I mean, that's one of the drivers of human nature. Men want to become successful so they can attract a higher level of partner, be that a guy or a girl. It doesn't matter. So that part I don't abide by. But in general, your career has to be your career. Try as much as you can to separate out your sex life and your romantic life from your career. It's just a good policy. You don't want to throw it all away because you got drunk one night and you acted on your impulses and it was consensual, but things took a turn at some point after it was over. All that being said, love is love. If you happen to connect with another comic and you're serious about it and they're serious about it, I say go for it. You have way more in common. Your lifestyles fit each other. And if you can make it work out, and there's plenty of examples of people who have, then go for it. Thanks for watching. I hope you find this channel again. And that's Willie scratching on a little pillow that I have for him and Bingo. Maybe you can't hear it because I put on the noise reduction on this. But I don't know why I tell you things like this. He's doing it again. I want you to know a little bit more about me so it's not just dry and straight. And that's it. I love you, Willie.